It's just after 2 in the morning. A quiet Texas neighborhood is wrapped in silence until a thunderous crash shatters the night. A car has slammed headfirst into a telephone pole. Headlights burn into the darkness, casting eerie shadows across the street. The engine still hums. Smoke curls up from the hood. To the neighbors rushing to their windows, it looks like a bad accident. A driver who lost control. Maybe someone drunk, maybe someone distracted. But when first responders arrive, they realize this isn't an accident at all. Inside the driver's seat sits a young woman. Her body slumped forward, blood soaking through her clothes. The windshield splattered in red. This wasn't the result of a crash. She's been shot. Not once. Not twice. 4 times. Her name is Maya Reynolds. Only 24 years old. Vibrant. Fearless. A young woman chasing life with all the energy she had. And now, her life has been stolen. The officers stand stunned. Who would do this? Why here, on this quiet street? And why, if it was a robbery, is cash still sitting untouched in the console? No, this wasn't random. It wasn't greed. This was something darker. Something personal. As paramedics work frantically, their voices urgent but hopeless, one thing becomes clear. There is no saving Maya. She is gone. And as the flashing lights illuminate the wreck, one horrifying truth takes shape. The crash was staged. The accident was a cover. Someone wanted Maya dead, and they wanted it to look like she never saw it coming. But who could hate her enough to do this? Detectives begin piecing together the scene. Bullet holes line the side of the car. Blood trails across the seat. The shooter had been sitting right beside her, in the passenger seat, firing directly at her as she tried to drive away. It was a calculated ambush. Cold. Merciless. Execution style. The neighborhood, once quiet, is now buzzing with whispers and dread. A young woman has been murdered in their own backyard, and the killer is out there, free, watching, hiding. But this case will not stay unsolved for long. Because inside the wrecked car, detectives make a discovery. A phone. Maya's phone. And on that phone lies the key to everything. Messages. Secrets. And the name of the man who would rather see Maya dead than see his truth exposed. This is not just the story of a murder. It is the story of a secret romance. A forbidden relationship built on lies, shame, and fear. A relationship that would ignite into rage and end in bloodshed. Maya Reynolds dreamed of living openly, authentically, fearlessly. But for one man, Derek Coleman, a local college football star, her existence was a threat. And that threat would drive him to kill. This is the tragic murder of Maya Reynolds. And it begins, not with an accident, but with an execution. Before she became the headline of a murder case, Maya Reynolds was simply Maya. To her friends, she was a force of energy. To her family, she was a daughter who could light up a room with nothing more than a smile. And to herself, she was a fighter. Born in the small town of Brookhaven, Texas, Maya always knew she didn't quite fit into the mold the town tried to press her into. Brookhaven was small, deeply religious, and overwhelmingly conservative. People there whispered about anyone who stood out. And Maya? She didn't just stand out. She shined. From a young age, she embraced her identity as a transgender woman, despite knowing the cost. The stares, the judgment, the cruel words whispered behind her back or shouted to her face. But Maya never bowed her head. She never let them break her spirit. She had a saying she lived by. If there's a way, I'll find it. And that motto carried her out of Brookhaven, out of the small-town gossip and narrow minds, into the nearby city of Clearwater. For Maya, Clearwater felt like New York City compared to home. Bigger streets, more opportunities, and, she hoped, a chance to live openly without fear. Maya was only 24, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had survived 1,000 battles. She had learned how to fight for acceptance, how to carve out space in a world that often tried to erase her existence. She loved to laugh, loud, unashamed, contagious. She loved to dance, losing herself in music that made her feel free. And above all, she loved deeply. To those close to her, Maya was fiercely loyal. If you were her friend, you were family. Her roommate and best friend, Alicia Grant, once said, Maya wasn't afraid of anything. She knew who she was, and she lived her truth every single day. She didn't hide, even when the world tried to make her feel like she should. But beneath that fearless exterior, there were cracks. Because as bold as Maya was, she was still human. She still felt the sting of rejection. She still carried the heavy burden of living in a place where being herself could be dangerous. Clearwater wasn't exactly a safe haven either. It sat in the buckle of the Bible Belt, where church pews overflowed on Sundays and sermons often preached against people like Maya. In that environment, the LGBTQ community stayed quiet, living in the shadows. But Maya refused to stay in the shadows. She wanted love. She wanted connection. She wanted what everyone deserves, to be seen and cherished for who she really was. And in her search for love, she met him. Derek Coleman. He was everything Maya wasn't. Popular. Respected. The star athlete of Clearwater College. A football player whose face was known across campus, whose name carried weight in town. At first, it felt like magic. Derek charmed her. He made her feel wanted. Their connection was fiery, passionate. For Maya, it was the kind of romance she dreamed of. One where someone finally chose her, not despite who she was, but because of it. At least, that's what she thought. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And Derek had one he was desperate to keep hidden. To his teammates, to his church, to his community, Derek was the golden boy. The one everyone looked up to. A straight, masculine star. The pride of a small town that worshipped football. But what would happen if they found out he was in a relationship with Maya Reynolds, a transgender woman? For Derek, that truth wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. It was shameful. It was something he couldn't allow to come to light. And that shame, that fear, would soon fester into something far more dangerous. For now, though, Maya lived her days with unshakable hope. She believed love could overcome secrecy. She believed Derek's affection meant something real. She couldn't know that the very thing she cherished, the relationship that gave her joy, would soon become the reason she was hunted. She laughed. She danced. She dreamed of a future where she didn't have to hide. But tragically, Maya's future was about to be stolen. Because for Derek Coleman, love was not worth exposure. And in a world where reputation meant everything, Maya's existence became his greatest threat. The flashing glow of police lights lit up the street, painting the quiet neighborhood in streaks of red and blue. Neighbors stood barefoot on their porches, whispering, clutching their robes tighter, staring in disbelief at the wreck in front of them. From the outside, it looked like a tragic accident. A car veered off the road, smashed into a telephone pole. But as officers leaned inside, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't a crash victim. This was a murder scene. Maya Reynolds sat motionless in the driver's seat, her head tilted forward, her chest soaked in blood. Shards of glass sparkled across her lap. And then the unmistakable evidence, the bullet holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tearing through the car, tearing through her body. Someone had been sitting right beside her, pulling the trigger again and again. Paramedics moved quickly, checking for signs of life, but there were none. Maya was gone. 24 years old, her entire future stolen in an instant. The officers' body cameras captured every chilling detail. The blood spattered across the windshield, the smeared streaks on the steering wheel, the gunpowder smell still lingering in the night air. This wasn't reckless driving. This wasn't random violence. It was cold-blooded execution. Detectives crouched near the car, scanning every inch. Something about the scene stood out immediately. Cash, sitting right there in the center console. Bills crumpled, untouched. Her purse still intact. Her jewelry still on her wrist. If this were a robbery, the killer had left everything behind. No, this wasn't about money. And then came another clue. Bullet casings scattered near the passenger side. The shots had been fired at close range, angled toward the driver. The shooter had been in the car with her. That meant this wasn't some random stranger on the street. Maya had let this person in. She trusted them enough to share the passenger seat. And that trust had cost her everything. As crime scene investigators swept the area, the pieces of the story began to emerge. Maya had been shot multiple times while still behind the wheel. Injured and desperate, she tried to escape, slamming her foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tearing down the street, weaving erratically as bullets continued to fly. Neighbors would later recall hearing not just the crash, but a series of pops echoing in the night. Gunshots. Bleeding, lungs collapsing, Maya still fought to survive. She lost control, skidding into the pole. The wheels spun helplessly in the mud as the car dug deeper into the earth, trapped, going nowhere. In those final moments, She never had a chance. Back at the car, detectives spotted the item that would become their most powerful lead. A phone. Maya's phone, wedged between the seat and the console. It was locked, of course, sealed behind a passcode. But detectives knew. Inside that phone was the truth. Calls, messages, photographs. Evidence of who she had been with. And possibly, evidence of who had killed her. But before they could break into it, they needed to understand who Maya really was. Who would want her dead? The next day, investigators knocked on the door of her apartment. Inside, her roommate and closest friend, Alicia Grant, answered. She had been waiting for Maya to come home that night. Instead, she opened her door to officers bearing devastating news. Maya was found dead in her car. Alicia's world collapsed in that instant. Her best friend, the woman she laughed with, confided in, leaned on, was gone. Through tears, Alicia gave detectives the first critical lead. The only reason Maya would have left the apartment that night was to see her boyfriend. His name, Alicia said quietly, was Derek Coleman. That name changed everything. Derek Coleman wasn't just some boyfriend. He wasn't just another man in Maya's life. He was a college football star, the pride of Clearwater College. Charismatic, adored, practically worshipped in his small, conservative town. And now, he was the prime suspect in Maya's brutal murder. For investigators, the pieces were starting to line up. For Maya's friends, the horror was only deepening. Because if Derek was the man she trusted most, then he was also the man who pulled the trigger. When detectives sat across from Alicia Grant, Maya's best friend and roommate, they saw a woman shattered by grief. Her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling. She could barely speak the words. "She was my sister," Alicia whispered. "My best friend. My family. She didn't deserve this." And then came the detail that stopped the room cold. The only reason Maya would have left home that night was to see her boyfriend. His name, Derek Coleman. To the people of Clearwater, Derek was untouchable. At just 21, he was the pride of his college football team, a powerful athlete with charm, swagger, and the adoration of nearly everyone in town. In a community that treated football players like kings, Derek was a rising prince. He carried himself with confidence. He basked in the spotlight, and he knew the weight of his reputation. But what no one knew, what Derek fought desperately to keep hidden, was his relationship with Maya Reynolds. According to Alicia, Derek had spent nights at their apartment. She had seen the way he looked at Maya, the way they laughed together, the way Maya lit up in his presence. It was love, or at least what Maya believed was love. But it was also a secret, a dangerous secret, because while Maya embraced her identity proudly, Derek lived in fear of exposure. To his teammates, to his coaches, to his church-going community, Derek had to be the straight, masculine star, the golden boy. The thought of anyone discovering that he was involved with a transgender woman terrified him. In a town that valued image above truth, Derek knew his life could come crashing down if anyone found out. That fear festered. It twisted. It poisoned. For Maya, the relationship was about connection, about love, about being seen. She thought Derek cared enough to stand beside her. But for Derek, the relationship was something else entirely. A ticking time bomb. A threat. A shame he couldn't allow to surface. Detectives dug deeper. They asked Alicia, had Maya ever seemed worried about Derek? Alicia nodded. Yes. Maya sometimes feared he was pulling away, hiding more and more. She didn't like the secrecy. She wanted to be acknowledged, not hidden away like a dirty secret. And then Alicia remembered something else. On the night Maya died, she had been upset, angry. She told Alicia she was going to confront Derek. That was the last time Alicia saw her alive. The picture grew clearer. This wasn't a random crime. This wasn't an accident. This was a relationship steeped in secrecy and shame. A relationship that, when pushed into the light, turned deadly. But suspicion wasn't proof. Detectives still needed hard evidence to tie Derek Coleman to the murder. That's when they turned back to the wrecked car, to the blood, to the bullet casings, and most importantly, to the phone. Locked inside Maya's iPhone could be the smoking gun, her final conversations, her last messages, maybe even the proof of where she was heading that night. But the phone was sealed with a passcode. The investigators had only a few tries before it would lock permanently. Every wrong guess brought them closer to losing everything. So they tried a shot in the dark. Maya's birthday. And it worked. The phone opened. And with it, so did the truth. There it was, Maya's digital diary. Her texts, her chats, her private world laid bare. And in those messages, Derek's name appeared again and again. Flirtations, late-night conversations, X-rated selfies. But there was something else. The tone of the messages shifted in the hours before Maya's death. Maya had accused Derek of seeing other people, cheating on her. Furious, she texted that she was coming to his campus to confront him. Derek begged her not to. "No, you're not," he wrote. Because if Maya walked onto that campus, if she was seen by his teammates or classmates, his secret would explode. The last message Maya ever sent, "I'm here." That was enough. The messages placed Derek with Maya the night she was murdered. The phone, the car, the eyewitness accounts, they all pointed in one chilling direction. And yet, when police brought Derek in for questioning, he showed no fear, no remorse, no grief. Instead, he smiled. He cracked jokes. He even asked for a hamburger. For investigators, it was a moment they would never forget. A young woman lay dead, her life brutally cut short, and the man suspected of pulling the trigger cared more about fast food than justice. It was arrogance. It was cruelty. And it was damning. By now, detectives were certain. Derek Coleman had killed Maya Reynolds. The motive? Shame. Fear. The desperate need to keep his secret buried. But the case wasn't over. They still needed one thing: evidence strong enough to convince a jury. And as the investigation deepened, the walls around Derek began to crumble. Because the truth, no matter how hard he tried to hide it, was about to come crashing down. For investigators, unlocking Maya Reynolds' phone felt like opening a vault. And inside that vault was everything they needed: her heart, her secrets, her fears, her truth. Scrolling through the messages was like watching a love story unfold and then slowly collapse into darkness. At first, the text between Maya and Derek Coleman read like any couple in the throes of passion. Sweet nicknames, late-night flirtations, romantic promises, even explicit photos exchanged in moments of desire. It was undeniable. Derek had been lying. He claimed to barely know Maya, claimed to have met her only once. Yet here was undeniable proof of an ongoing relationship. But as detectives read further, the tone shifted. In the days leading up to her death, Maya grew frustrated. She wanted more. She wanted acknowledgement. She was tired of being hidden away like a secret shame. Her messages grew sharper, more demanding. "Why are you ignoring me? I'm not your dirty little secret. You're not going to keep playing me." Derek's replies, in contrast, dripped with fear. He begged her to stay quiet, to stop threatening to show up at his college. He couldn't let anyone see them together. And then came the night of the murder. Maya, furious, told him she was on her way. She was going to his campus. She wasn't going to be silenced anymore. Her last message was chilling in its simplicity. "I'm here." Detectives sat in silence, staring at those words on the screen. They knew what came next. Minutes after sending that message, Maya Reynolds was shot dead behind the wheel of her car. The phone didn't just tell the story, it gave them a timeline. It placed Derek Coleman at the center of her final moments. Still, investigators dug deeper. The phone revealed not just Maya's relationship with Derek, but her digital life as a whole. She had been talking to other men too, chatting with strangers online, even making tentative plans to meet. One of those men, known only as George, initially drew suspicion. But when he passed a polygraph test and provided an alibi, attention snapped back to Derek. Because Derek wasn't just another name in her phone. He was the one she saw last. And unlike George, Derek had something to lose. The more police learned about him, the clearer the motive became. Derek Coleman wasn't just any student. He was an athlete, a rising star. In a town where church and football ruled above all else, his reputation meant everything. To be exposed as Maya's lover wasn't just embarrassing. It was, in his mind, ruinous. His masculinity, his status, his identity as the golden boy of Clearwater would be destroyed. And so, investigators believed, he decided to destroy Maya instead. But the phone offered more than messages. It offered context. It showed just how much Maya cared, and just how desperate Derek was to keep her in the shadows. There were affectionate texts. "I miss you, baby." And then, almost in the same breath, frantic ones. "Don't come up here. Don't let anyone see you." It painted a portrait of two people living in completely different realities. Maya, dreaming of love out loud. Derek, suffocating under secrecy. That collision of desires would prove deadly. When detectives confronted Derek with the phone evidence, his reaction was telling. He brushed it off. He smirked. He denied, deflected, dodged every question. But nothing could erase what was on that screen. The texts, the selfies, the time-stamped messages placing him with Maya in the hours before her death. And then there was the most damning piece of all, his DNA, later discovered on the seatbelt and door handle of Maya's car. Proof he had been inside the vehicle he swore he'd never touched. By now, investigators had built a case that was airtight. They had a motive, fear of exposure, a timeline, messages leading right up to the murder, physical evidence, DNA inside her car, and damning behavior. Derek deleting his messaging app the very morning after the killing. The digital trail didn't just point to Derek. It screamed his name. For Maya's loved ones. Each revelation was both vindication and heartbreak. Yes, the truth was coming out. Yes, the lies were being exposed. But no amount of evidence could bring her back. They were left to grieve while watching her killer grin his way through interrogations, acting as if he were untouchable. But he wasn't untouchable anymore. The truth had caught up to him. And soon, justice would too. When detectives finally brought Derek Coleman into the interrogation room, they expected nervousness, maybe panic, maybe even guilt. What they didn't expect was arrogance. Derek leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head like he had all the time in the world. The evidence was stacking up around him like a tidal wave, yet he smirked, shrugged, and rolled his eyes. One detective leaned forward. "We're investigating a homicide, Derek. Maya Reynolds is dead. You were with her the night she was killed." Derek's response? Not denial. Not fear. Not outrage. He smiled. "Can I get a hamburger?" Even the seasoned investigators were stunned. A young woman's blood was still fresh on the pavement, and here he was, asking for fast food. It was chilling. His tone wasn't just dismissive, it was sociopathic. Detectives pressed harder. They asked if he knew Maya. He claimed he didn't. They asked if he had ever been in her car. He swore he hadn't. They asked about the messages. He insisted he barely talked to her. Lie after lie, all delivered with the same smug grin. But detectives weren't finished. They pulled surveillance footage from Derek's dormitory. Hours of grainy tape, students coming and going, late-night activity. At first, nothing seemed unusual. And then, there he was, Derek Coleman, leaving his dorm shortly before Maya was shot, returning just minutes after her car slammed into that telephone pole. The timing was too perfect, too damning, too incriminating to ignore. Still, Derek didn't flinch. He thought he was smarter than the police, smarter than the system, untouchable because of his status. But science doesn't care about arrogance. Forensic analysts had swabbed the inside of Maya's car, and what came back from the lab was the nail in his coffin. DNA. On the seatbelt. On the door handle. And it wasn't Maya's. It was Derek Coleman's. The very car he swore he'd never set foot inside carried his genetic fingerprint. Detectives confronted him with the evidence. "Derek, your DNA is in Maya's car. How do you explain that?" He shrugged. He smiled again, as if it were a game. That indifference, that complete lack of emotion, rattled even the most hardened investigators. One later said, "You expect guilt. You expect fear. What you don't expect is laughter." He laughed, like it was all a joke. But the evidence told a story far more serious than Derek ever would. Messages showing their relationship. Surveillance video putting him out of his dorm that night. DNA proving he was in Maya's car. A motive rooted in fear and shame. Piece by piece, the puzzle was complete. Derek Coleman was not just a suspect. He was the killer. Still, he refused to confess. Through hours of questioning, through mountains of evidence stacked against him, Derek remained arrogant, smug, and utterly detached. Detectives tried every tactic: sympathy, anger, silence. His response never changed. At one point, they asked bluntly, "Why are you having sex with a man?" Derek snapped back, "I wasn't. I'm not gay at all." The denial was desperate, hollow, because the truth was written all over the phone in explicit detail. Maya had been open about who she was. Derek had known exactly what he was doing. But in his world, admitting that truth was worse than murder. By the end of interrogation, detectives were done playing games. "Derek Coleman, you are under arrest for the murder of Maya Reynolds." His response? Not shock, not fear, not even anger, just the same smug grin. And again, "I'm hungry." For investigators, it was more than disrespectful, it was terrifying. Because here sat a young man capable of cold-blooded execution, caught red-handed with evidence, confronted with the weight of a life sentence, and he acted like it was nothing. It was the kind of arrogance that made one detective later describe him as truly dangerous, the kind of person who could pull the trigger without a shred of remorse. But Derek's performance in that interrogation room was only the beginning. Because once he went to trial, once he stood before a judge and jury, his arrogance would reach a whole new level, and the mask of the golden boy would finally shatter. The trial of Derek Coleman drew crowds. Reporters filled the benches. Local residents leaned forward, whispering. Some came out of morbid curiosity. Others, because they needed to see justice. And at the heart of it all sat the family and friends of Maya Reynolds. Their grief was still raw, their pain written in every tear, every trembling hand, every heavy breath. They were here to speak for Maya, because she no longer could. From the very start, Derek behaved as if the courtroom were his stage. He smirked. He chuckled. He whispered to his lawyers as if the whole proceeding were some elaborate joke. More than once, his attorney nudged him sharply, whispering, "Straighten up. Sit still." But Derek only grinned wider, like a child being scolded in class. To the jury, his arrogance was impossible to miss. To Maya's family, it was unbearable. The prosecution laid out the case piece by piece, brick by damning brick. The text messages. Intimate, explicit, undeniable. The last words Maya ever typed. "I'm here." Surveillance footage showing Derek leaving his dorm, then returning minutes later. DNA inside her car, proof he'd been there despite his lies. And finally, the motive. His desperation to keep their relationship hidden. His fear of exposure. His shame. The prosecutor's voice thundered across the courtroom. Maya Reynolds was murdered because Derek Coleman was too afraid of the truth. Too afraid that the world might know he was with her. Instead of facing that truth, he silenced her, forever. Then came the defense. They tried to paint Derek as a young man trapped, confused, overwhelmed. They tried to twist the evidence, suggesting Maya had been involved with other men, that perhaps someone else had pulled the trigger. But the digital trail didn't lie. Neither did the DNA. The defense's words sounded hollow, desperate, flimsy against the mountain of proof. And through it all, Derek sat back, smirking, as if none of it applied to him. The most powerful moments of the trial came not from lawyers, but from Maya's loved ones. Her best friend, Alicia Grant, took the stand, voice breaking as she described the last night she saw Maya alive. How Maya had been upset. How she had said she was going to confront Derek. She trusted him, Alicia whispered. And he betrayed her. Then came Maya's mother. A woman broken, her hands clutching a tissue, her voice trembling but steady with rage. "My baby wanted to live her truth," she said. "She wanted to be loved, just like anyone else. And for that, he killed her. He killed her because he was ashamed. But I will never be ashamed of her. Never." The courtroom sat in silence, some jurors wiping their own eyes. After days of testimony, closing arguments echoed one simple truth. Derek Coleman was guilty. The jury filed out. Hours passed. Maya's family held hands, prayed, waited. The air was thick with tension, the weight of justice hanging by a thread. And then, the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree." The words sent a wave through the courtroom. Relief. Sobs. Trembling shoulders collapsing into one another. Derek's reaction? A smirk. As if even the word guilty meant nothing. But the judge wasn't finished. At sentencing, Derek faced the possibility of as little as 5 years. But then came his final act of arrogance. Laughing, muttering, showing complete disrespect even as Maya's family wept just feet away. The judge had seen enough. "Mr. Coleman," the judge said sternly, "your lack of remorse, your disregard for this court, and your utter indifference to the value of human life leave me no choice. Life in prison." For Maya's family, it was justice, but not healing. No sentence, no punishment, no prison walls could ever bring her back. And as Derek was led away, shackled, he turned his head toward Maya's loved ones. And he laughed. It took 4 officers to push him forward, his arrogance spewing even in chains. For the family of Maya Reynolds, the trial ended with a bitter truth. Yes, her killer would never walk free again. But neither would she. Their daughter, their sister, their friend, was gone. and they were left with only memories and the haunting knowledge that her life had been stolen not by a stranger, but by the man she trusted most. The gavel fell. The sentence was handed down. Derek Coleman would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For the justice system, it was a victory. For Maya Reynolds' family, it was something far less. Because no verdict, no sentence, no prison term could ever bring her back. In the months after the trial, Maya's loved ones tried to hold on to the fragments she left behind. Alicia kept the photos on her phone, replaying videos just to hear Maya's laugh again. Her mother clung to her favorite clothes, still folded in drawers, as if she might walk through the door one more time. Friends spoke of her with reverence. The way she lit up a room, the way she refused to let fear define her, the way she embraced life with open arms. But every memory carried a sharp edge, because behind every smile was the unshakable truth: Maya was gone. And tragically, she was not alone. In 2015, the year Maya was murdered, she was among the first of 21 transgender women reported killed in the United States. Nearly all of them were women of color. By the following year, that number had climbed even higher. Each story carried the same themes: fear, secrecy, rejection, shame turned violent. Each life cut short because of who they were, and because someone else could not bear that truth. For Maya, the risk of living authentically came with unimaginable consequences. She wanted to love openly. She wanted to be cherished. She wanted what every human being deserves. Instead, she was hunted down by the very man she loved. And for what? Because he was too afraid of whispers? Because he cared more about his image than her life? That is the weight of this story. The cruel cost of fear. Even from prison, Derek tried to posture. He sent letters claiming he'd been wronged, insisting he would one day walk free. He painted himself as a victim, as if the evidence hadn't spoken louder than his arrogance ever could. But for Maya's family, there is no freedom from grief. There is only the empty chair at the table, the silence in the apartment she once filled with laughter, the birthdays, the holidays, the milestones she will never see. They carry her memory like a flame, flickering, fragile, but unextinguished. And so, Maya's story lives on. Not just as a case file, not just as a headline, but as a reminder of the human cost of silence, shame, and secrecy. She was more than the way she died. She was joy. She was courage. She was love. Her life mattered. Her story matters. Tonight, when you think of Maya Reynolds, remember her not for the bullets that ended her life, but for the fire with which she lived it. Remember her laugh, her fearless spirit, her refusal to shrink in a world that tried to make her small. And remember this: until society learns to see every person's truth as worthy of love, stories like Maya's will keep being written in blood. This is not just Maya's tragedy. It is ours.